I still remember the first time I saw him in the grocery store. He was standing in the produce section, one scarred hand hovering over the tomatoes like he was making the most important decision of his life. Most people would have glanced away quickly, uncomfortable with the patchwork of burned scars that covered the left side of his face and neck, disappearing beneath his collar. But I didn't look away. Maybe I should have. Maybe it would have saved us both a lot of pain. Or maybe, just maybe, it would have cost us everything that mattered. His name was Marcus. I wouldn't learn that for another 3 weeks, but I'd see him almost every day after that first encounter, always at the same coffee shop on 5th Street, always sitting in the corner booth with his back to the wall, always alone. The baristas knew his order by heart, a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin, but they'd leave it on the counter instead of bringing it to his table. He'd have to get up and retrieve it himself, walking through the cafe while people pretended not to stare. I watched this ritual play out morning after morning, watched the way his jaw would tighten, the way his shoulders would hunch just slightly as he made that walk. I was no stranger to being different. Growing up gay in a small Texas town had taught me all about the weight of other people's stares, the way silence could be louder than any slur. I'd moved to Portland 3 years ago for a fresh start, thinking a bigger city would mean freedom, acceptance, all those things they promise you in the glossy brochures. And it was better, sure. I could hold another man's hand without fear of violence. But loneliness, I'd learned, doesn't care what city you live in. I worked as a graphic designer from home, which meant my coffee shop visits were the highlight of my social interaction most days. Pathetic, maybe, but honest. I'd set up my laptop at a table near the window, pretending to work on client projects, while really I was just people watching, making up stories about the lives passing by outside. The young mother rushing past with twins in a stroller, probably late for daycare drop-off. The old man walking his ancient golden retriever, both of them moving at the same arthritic pace. And Marcus, always Marcus, sitting in his corner like a fortress, his eyes constantly scanning the room. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. The coffee shop was more crowded than usual, some local book club had commandeered half the tables, and there was nowhere for me to sit. I stood there like an idiot, laptop bag over my shoulder, scanning for any available space. That's when I heard it. A voice, rough like gravel, barely above a whisper. "You can sit here if you want. I don't bite." I turned, and there he was, Marcus, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Up close, the scars were more extensive than I'd realized. They crawled up the left side of his neck, disappearing into his hairline, pulling at the corner of his eye and mouth. But his eyes, God, his eyes were this incredible shade of amber brown, warm and guarded all at once. "You sure?" I asked, and immediately felt stupid. He'd offered, hadn't he? "Table's got 4 chairs. I'm only using 1. He shrugged, and I caught a glimpse of more scarring on his hand as he reached for his coffee cup. I sat down, fumbling with my laptop, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement I made. Don't stare at the scars. Don't obviously not stare at the scars. Act normal. What's normal? I ended up focusing way too intently on opening my laptop, nearly dropping it in the process. "Rough morning?" There was the slightest hint of amusement in his voice. "Something like that," I managed, finally getting my laptop open. "Thanks for the seat. I'm Daniel, by the way." "Marcus." He extended his hand, the scarred one, and I took it without hesitation. His grip was firm, warm. He seemed surprised that I didn't flinch. We didn't talk much that first time. I actually did have work to do, and he seemed content to sit in silence, reading a worn paperback. But something had shifted. The next day, when I walked into the coffee shop, he caught my eye and nodded at the empty seat across from him. I sat down without asking. This became our routine. It took a week before we had a real conversation. He asked what I was working on, and I showed him some logo designs for a local brewery. He studied them with genuine interest, offering thoughtful feedback that showed he actually understood design principles. Turned out he'd been an art teacher before the fire. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. We talked about safe things. Movies, books, the ridiculous price of rent in Portland, whether the new Thai place on Morrison was as good as people claimed. Easy conversation, the kind that feels effortless once you find your rhythm. And we had rhythm. He'd make a dry observation about someone's terrible parking job visible through the window, and I'd build on it until we were both trying not to laugh too loudly. His laugh was rusty, like he didn't use it often enough, but it was real. 3 weeks in, a guy approached our table. Young, college age, probably doing some kind of social justice project. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Marcus, but not quite looking at him. "I just wanted to say that I think you're really brave for, being out in public like this. It's really inspiring." I watched Marcus's face close off like a door slamming shut. "I'm not your inspiration," he said flatly. "I'm just trying to drink my coffee." The kid stammered an apology and retreated. Marcus stood abruptly, grabbed his book, and walked out without another word. I sat there, frozen, unsure if I should follow or give him space. In the end, I packed up slowly, giving him time to disappear if that's what he needed. But the next morning, he was back in his usual spot. When I walked in, he looked up, and for a moment, I thought he might tell me to find another seat. Instead, he just said, "Sorry about yesterday." "Don't apologize to me," I said, sitting down. "That guy was an idiot." "People mean well." His voice was tired. "Meaning well doesn't make it less dehumanizing." I opened my laptop, trying to keep my tone casual. "You're not a motivational poster. You're just a person." He looked at me for a long moment, something shifting behind those amber eyes. "You get it." "I get it," I confirmed, and I did. Different circumstances, sure, but I understood what it was like to have people reduce you to one aspect of your identity, to be treated as a symbol instead of a person. After that, something deepened between us. He started telling me things. Small things at first. He lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Southeast. He'd been a high school art teacher for 8 years. He missed teaching, but couldn't handle the way students stared, the way parents complained, requesting their kids be moved to a different class. The fire had been 4 years ago, an electrical fault in his old apartment building. He'd gone back in to help an elderly neighbor get out. They'd both survived, but barely. "I don't regret it," he said one morning, his finger tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "Saving Mrs. Chen. I just regret that I can't seem to move past it. Everyone else did. The news cycle moved on. The city rebuilt the building. But I'm still here, still wearing it on my skin." "Trauma doesn't follow a timeline," I said quietly. "There's no statute of limitations on healing." "Is that from a therapy session?" He wasn't mocking, just curious. Several, actually. Took me years to accept that coming out wasn't a one-time thing, that I'd have to keep doing it, keep dealing with people's reactions forever. It gets easier, but it doesn't go away. "You're gay?" He seemed surprised, then immediately embarrassed. "Sorry, that's not, I didn't assume." "It's okay," I laughed. "I'm not exactly broadcasting it. Learned young to keep my cards close to my chest." "Does it get lonely, the hiding?" I considered the question, really considered it. "Yes, but being visible can be lonely too, just in a different way." He nodded slowly, understanding passing between us without more words needed. I started looking forward to our coffee shop mornings with an intensity that probably should have alarmed me. I'd wake up thinking about what we might talk about, what small detail of his life he might share. I learned he was a veteran, Marines, did 2 tours before getting out and going to college on the GI Bill. I learned he loved old horror movies, the cheesy ones from the 50s with rubber monsters. I learned he'd had a boyfriend once, before the fire, who'd left 3 months after, unable to handle the medical appointments and the depression and the changed face looking back at him. "Can't really blame him," Marcus said when he told me this. "I was a mess. Still am, probably." "You're not a mess," I said, more forcefully than I intended. "You're dealing with something incredibly difficult. That guy was a coward." "Careful, Daniel. Keep talking like that and I might think you actually like me." It was said lightly, teasingly, but there was something underneath it. A question, maybe. A hope. And I realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that I did like him, more than liked him. I was falling for this scarred, guarded man who made me laugh and thought deeply about everything and read fantasy novels in coffee shops. But I didn't say that. Instead, I just smiled and said, "Well, you do have excellent taste in books." "Coward," he said, but he was smiling too. That rare, beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. I went home that day and paced my apartment for an hour, trying to figure out what I was feeling, what I wanted. I was 32 years old, old enough to know that connections like this didn't come along often, but I was also old enough to know that wanting something didn't mean you should reach for it. Marcus had been hurt enough. The last thing he needed was me fumbling through some confused feelings, potentially ruining the one friendship he seemed to have. But the heart wants what it wants, and mine apparently wanted Marcus. The realization didn't come with fireworks or a dramatic moment. It was quieter than that, more certain. It was in the way I caught myself smiling at random times during the day, remembering something he'd said. It was in the way my chest felt tight when I'd see him waiting at our table, 2 coffee cups already ordered, 1 for each of us. It was in the way I'd started noticing little things, like how he'd unconsciously touch his scars when he was nervous, or how his eyes would light up when he talked about his students, the ones he missed teaching. A month passed, then another. We'd graduated from just coffee shop meetings to occasional walks through the neighborhood. He'd shown me his favorite bookstore, a tiny place tucked away on a side street that specialized in science fiction and fantasy. I'd taken him to the art supply store I frequented, watching his face come alive as he ran his fingers over different types of paper, different brush sets. "You should start painting again," I said as we left the store. "Maybe." But he'd bought a small watercolor set, and that felt like progress. It was a rainy Thursday in November when everything came to a head. We were in the coffee shop, our usual spot, when a woman walked in with a little girl, maybe 5 years old. The girl took one look at Marcus and started crying, burying her face in her mother's leg. The mother shot us an apologetic look, but didn't say anything, just hustled her daughter out quickly. Marcus's face went blank. Without a word, he stood up and walked to the bathroom. He was gone for 15 minutes. When he came back, his eyes were red. "I need to go," he said, not looking at me. "Marcus, wait." I grabbed my stuff and followed him out into the rain. "Please, just wait." He stopped on the sidewalk, rain soaking through both our jackets. "You don't have to do this, Daniel. You don't have to follow me out here and try to make me feel better. I know what I look like. I know I scare children. I've made my peace with it." "That's bullshit," I said, and his eyes widened in surprise. I never swore. "You haven't made peace with anything. You're in pain, and you're isolated, and you're convinced that's what you deserve. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you're happy living like this, keeping everyone at arm's length, sitting in that coffee shop alone every single day until I randomly sat down at your table. You don't understand." His voice cracked. "You can't understand." "So help me understand." I stepped closer, rain streaming down both our faces. "I want to understand, Marcus. I want to know you, all of you, not just the parts you think are acceptable to share." "Why?" The word came out as almost a shout. "Why do you care? What do you want from me?" And there it was, the question I'd been avoiding for weeks. I could lie. I could step back, claim I was just being a good friend, let us both retreat to safer ground. Or I could tell the truth and risk everything. "I want you," I said simply. "I want morning coffees and book recommendations and terrible horror movie marathons. I want to hear about your day and tell you about mine. I want to make you laugh, because your laugh is the best sound I've ever heard. I want to know what makes you angry and what makes you hopeful and what you dream about at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. I want all of it, Marcus. I want you." The silence that followed felt eternal. Rain pounded the sidewalk around us. Somewhere, a car alarm was going off. Marcus just stared at me, his expression unreadable. "You don't want this," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "You don't want the nightmares and the panic attacks and the days where I can't even look at myself in the mirror. You don't want to deal with people staring everywhere we go, with children crying, with the constant explanations and the pity and the inspiration porn. You deserve someone normal, Daniel. Someone easy." "I don't want easy," I said. "I want you. Scars and nightmares and all of it. I'm not scared of your pain, Marcus. I'm only scared of losing you before we even get a chance to try." His hand came up, touching his scars unconsciously. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone in again." "Neither do I admitted. "I've been alone for so long. I've forgotten what it's like to really connect with someone. But I want to learn. With you, if you'll let me." He took a shaky breath, and then another. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I think about you all the time. I think about what it would be like to touch you, to kiss you. And then I remember what I look like, and I can't imagine anyone wanting that." I closed the distance between us, reaching up slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. I cupped his face with both hands, one on each side, my thumbs tracing along his cheekbones, over the scarred skin and the smooth. "You're beautiful," I whispered. "You're brave and kind and funny, and you're beautiful." "Daniel," it came out as a broken sound. "Can I kiss you?" I asked. For an answer, he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine. It was tentative at first, questioning, like he was afraid I'd change my mind. But I kissed him back with everything I had, trying to pour all my certainty, all my want, into that connection. His arms came around me, pulling me close, and we stood there in the rain, kissing like teenagers, like we'd been waiting our whole lives for this moment. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. Marcus touched his forehead to mine. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Me too," I said. "But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone." He laughed, that rusty, beautiful laugh. "When did you get so wise?" "I have no idea what I'm doing," I confessed. "I'm making this up as I go." "Well, you're doing pretty good so far." We went back to his apartment that night. It was small but tidy, filled with books and art supplies he claimed he never used. We ordered pizza and watched a terrible 50s horror movie about giant ants. He fell asleep on my shoulder halfway through, and I just sat there, afraid to move, afraid to break the spell. The next few months weren't easy. He'd been right about the nightmares. Some nights, he'd wake up gasping, convinced he was still in that burning building. I learned to just hold him, to talk him through it, to remind him where he was, that he was safe. We dealt with stares and whispers, and one memorable incident where a guy at a bar asked me loudly why I'd choose to be with someone like that when I could do better. Marcus had started to stand up, ready to leave, but I'd turned to the guy and said very calmly, "I am doing better, better than I ever thought possible, and you're an asshole." Then I'd kissed Marcus right there in front of everyone, claiming him, claiming us. He started painting again, slowly at first, just watercolors in a sketchbook, but gradually he moved to canvas, to bigger pieces. His art was raw and honest, exploring themes of transformation and survival. A local gallery agreed to show some of his work, and on opening night, I watched him stand in front of strangers, talking about his art, about his journey. He was nervous, touching his scars constantly, but he didn't hide. "I'm proud of you," I told him later that night, back in the apartment we'd started sharing. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "You make me believe I'm more than what happened to me." "You are more," I said firmly. "You always were. I just helped you remember." We're still figuring it out, still learning how to navigate this thing between us. Some days are harder than others, but every morning we still go to that coffee shop, still sit at that corner table. Only now we sit on the same side, close enough to touch. And when people stare, we let them, because we're done hiding. We're done letting fear dictate our lives. Marcus still has bad days, days where the weight of everything feels too heavy. But he has good days too, more and more of them. Days where he laughs freely, where he paints for hours, where he talks about maybe going back to teaching someday. And I have someone who sees me, really sees me, all the parts I usually keep hidden. Someone who makes me want to be braver, kinder, more honest. The scarred veteran everyone avoided found someone who stayed, and the lonely designer hiding behind his laptop found someone worth being seen for. We found each other in a coffee shop on an ordinary morning, and we chose each other every day after. That's not inspiration porn or a feel-good story about overcoming. It's just two people who decided that love was worth the risk, that connection was worth the vulnerability. It's just us, scarred and imperfect and trying our best. And somehow that's everything.